aren't members, it's free to join, so feel free, you can have a chat to me throughout the day or at the networking tonight and learn about what it's all about and sign up if you are eligible, and which means you're writing songs and you might have had a performance. So we're APRA AMCOS. A lot of people aren't really aware of the difference, so I'll just touch on it briefly now and then we can have a further chat later on, because I find that a lot of people sign up for APRA and then maybe not AMCOS, and they often think, oh, it's APRA AMCOS, I've signed up for both. So APRA is all about the performance and communication of your works, which is why most people sign up initially for that, because they've had a performance or it's been played maybe on the radio or somewhere like that. So that's APRA, and then AMCOS is the reproduction of the music. And usually now we find people join AMCOS because their music's going onto streaming services and there's a reproduction of that. So if you're an existing member and you think, oh yeah, I'm a member, jump onto the app. So I'll just give the app a little bit of a plug, because we now have an app which is really handy. You can register works, do performance reports, and you can also log in and see if you're a member of APRA and AMCOS. And it's really quick to join AMCOS via the web portal if you're already an APRA member. Okay, so welcome to this Regional Sessions event, which is part of our WA series. It's taken place in Victoria and New South Wales previously, presented by APRA AMCOS and proudly supported by the DLGSC, the Department of Local Government, Sports and Cultural Industries. This is our final stop on our 5-event tour around WA, and we're really excited to be rounding up things here with you in Broome. We've been to Albany, Busselton, Kalgoorlie-Boulder and Karratha. We created the regional sessions as a high-impact day to foster creativity, connections and industry knowledge at a crucial time for anyone pursuing music. It's been a tough time with COVID and things are back, but it's still, for those who are touring, trying to tour, it's still pretty tough, expensive to do that. So today's all about the songwriting and networking and building connections with people. So taking it back to that, a full day of talking about songwriting, thinking about songwriting, doing songwriting workshops, all the things songwriting, and connecting and networking, which we'll be doing a lot of at the end of the day. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. We'll kick off very shortly with our keynote presentation, followed by your first workshop. Then we'll break for lunch and have our support act session, a panel discussion, and then your second workshop to round out the day. You'll find the event timings for today on posters stuck around the venue. So there's a few stuck around. You can have a look if you're not sure, or just ask any of us. And you can find your workshop sessions on the back of your lanyard. And just make sure to attend the correct one, whatever's written on your lanyard. If you have any questions about which workshop you're in, just come and find a staff member. And speaking of which, you can identify the staff members. We're wearing these black lanyards. There's 4 of us around. So just come and ask us if you have any questions. You should have all picked up a bag on your way in. If you can, please take it with you wherever you go, because they all look fairly similar. So to avoid them getting mixed up, just grab your bag and take it around. They've got a notebook and pen, water bottle, and some other goodies in there for you to enjoy. And finally, we will have the final session for today, the networking event. So networking and some performances for you. And held just down the road at Matzo's. So hopefully you can come along and check out those performances, have something to eat and drink and just have a chat with us and with each other. Under 18s are able to attend this event as well. You just need a parent or guardian to attend with you. And you'll need your event lanyard to get the food and drink, so make sure to bring that with you as well. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Petris Torres. Petris is from Wawili Sound Solutions, a Broome-based business focusing on sound reinforcement services and systems in the film and television industries, both in the field and post. Wawili Sound Studio is a purpose-built Besser block and concrete facility built from the ground up. The studio is situated near famous Cable Beach, surrounded by the beautiful turquoise waters of Roebuck Bay, tucked away in bushlands in the nowhere else but here Broome community. We might be one of the it says, we might be one of the most isolated sound houses in Australia, but don't let that fool you. Wawili Sound Solutions is a young, tech-savvy company that invests aggressively in the latest technology to bring to Australian film the highest in sonic fidelity possible. And speaking with Petris today is Matt Francis, the station manager from Gulari FM. Please join me in welcoming both Matt and Petris to the stage, and I'll hand over to you for this conversation.
Thank you for the introduction. Just before we get too far into it, I want to just make sure everyone's comfortable. Is anyone else cold? We're all a little cold at the front here. Any chance we can get that turned down a bit? Thank you. It's just freezing. We're Broome mob. We're used to things a little warmer, you know. I think your mob came out from Perth. You're used to the cold. So let's get this one started. It is a real honour, real privilege to be here in this role. Thank you so much to APRA AMCOS for giving me the opportunity to be able to speak to Petris and have Petris be able to come and speak to you as a community station. Basically, we are going to be one of the main places that will play your music, one of the first places that will play your music as you get unearthed and off the ground. And it's a real privilege to be here and to see lots of other artists that I recognise and lots of emerging. So let's get started. Petris, I heard a real deadly plug for your studio there. It is a pretty flash little studio, isn't it?
Yeah, it's getting there.
You're getting there? Yep.
Yeah, it's getting there. It's been taken a long time, but getting there. Yeah.
So why don't we start off letting our guest here know today a bit more about Wawili Sounds and what it does and where it sits in the song creation process.
Well, these days I'm doing less music composition because, I'll do music composition, but they're generally smaller productions. A lot of my work, some of the mid-tier contracts and stuff like that is more like sound effects and dialogue editing and mixing and stuff like that. So I'm doing a little bit less music composition these days, which was always the hope. And I still do it, and I kind of blur the line between music composition and sound design / ambience and things like that, and so I'm having a lot of fun with that these days. In terms of the studio, it's kind of positioned now to work with other musicians as opposed to just myself. So we did a lot of investing in trying to gear that towards tracking and music production with other people.
Yeah. There's actually an artist here already that you've worked with in the crowd as well.
Yep. My uncle, Mark Colesmith. And that was a lot of fun. I think that was 4 months in the studio, music production, and obviously tracking, but it was pretty, I'm not sure if Uncle Mark's going to be speaking to this later, but no? Okay, well, do you mind if I do? Do you mind if I do? Okay, so we were quite lucky. We got to work with artists around the world, like Hammond players in Tennessee and drummers in New York. And if I'm shaking, it's because it's cold.
Yeah, still a bit cold in here.
Yeah, no worries, thank you. But yeah, it was pretty good. There was a harp player that was in the symphony in Ireland, and it all came together. But obviously, it was a synth-driven album. Obviously, Uncle Mark's the hero in the story, and I was just kind of a support role, a bit of a techie, and then on occasion maybe he might ask me a question, and I'd offer what my thoughts are, and mostly I just agreed with everything he was doing. He was pretty good, and we had another sound engineer in there, didn't we, Uncle? We had another sound engineer. That was a story in itself, but. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it's an amazing album, and maybe later you can find out from Uncle Mark. I think that a lot of young fellows in Broome should be listening to that album. It's called Kalaji, K-A-L-I... Yeah, K-A-L-A-J-I. You guys should have a listen to that, if you guys can remember that. I hear a lot of kids listening to a lot of music, and you guys would not believe this was produced in Broome, so that's pretty exciting.
And on to producing music here in Broome. Can you talk us through that process of, you said you had a lot of fun in the studio there. What's it like with you on the producer side or the music production side, working alongside an actual artist who's there? Is it a back and forth? What's that process like?
A lot of the time, production is sometimes not about the actual production of music, but actually working with people, and sometimes the kind of people that are in there, they can be quite self-conscious, and so a lot of the things that you're trying to keep an eye out for is like little emotional things, and you're trying to see if they're having a hard time, opening up, or they're having a hard time. Some people judge themselves really, really hardly, and so you've got to try to help them through that process and help them learn that that's actually part of the process, is actually letting things, unfold and stuff like that. So sometimes it's not about the musical side of it or the technical sound engineering side. It's actually just trying to make them comfortable and let the art come out of the artist, and you can help them navigate that. Sometimes things might not be going that great, and you can say, "Oh, it's sounding great. Let's try this," as opposed to "This is not working." So it's just simple little things like that, and I'm learning those things more and more myself. Is that you got to be careful of what you say. So.
How you say it. That's a really good point, and it's interesting you brought that up, because in my experience, I work in a studio as well, in radio, and with interviews, with even just live performances sometimes, you are working with people and you're trying to coach them, you're trying to warm them up into it, and you're right, they doubt themselves a lot. So if you're in there with a musician, I guess being able to work alongside them and give them that advice in a good way that helps build them up and actually be a bit constructive, I think is the word.
Yeah, no, it's pretty tricky. I've worked with artists before that were actually doing an amazing job, and they were just so hard on themselves, and it's, you got to try to, you got to give them that encouragement, but you also got to let them know that, some people think that when they're not getting it in the first 2-3 takes, that and then that puts a little bit of a lump in their, thing, and it takes away from their performances. So, yeah, you got to help them understand that there's a process, and that process might take a while, but I'll give you an example. Actually, back in the day, I used to write about 4 songs to every one comp that I would keep for a film composition, and so I'd throw away 4 and I'd keep 1. And I gave myself a real hard time because I couldn't get it the first time or whatever. But then I realised that was my process. My process was writing 5 songs and throwing away 4, or putting them in a folder for later. And they were good comps, but they just weren't. They weren't just, they weren't a right fit for the emotion or the content. And so, and once I realised that, it's like, oh, that's so much easier. I'd write one and it would be bad, and I'd be like, that's okay, that's my process. And so that's, something that I stumbled across, yeah.
Yeah, that's really deadly. You mentioned that actually, because you're right, everyone will have their own different process, and some people might be hard on themselves about not nailing it in the first or second or third time. Just work out what your process is and learn to be okay with that, I guess.
Yeah, and also trying to help other people understand their process, yeah.
So bringing it back to, we can see in front of us, we've got some songwriters, some people who are just getting started, a lot of high school age kids as well. I guess my next question leads into when they are writing songs and wanting to do their own in-home sort of production. Now, you've got a very good setup at your place, but what could you say, or what advice could you give to kids who want to look at trying to start something at home with that production side of things?
These days, YouTube is amazing. Like, you can literally do equivalent to a uni degree on YouTube these days. So you can, and hey, go to uni. I'm not saying don't go to uni, but that's what I did. I did probably 25 years just studying online. And I'm the kind of guy that when it's Saturday and Sunday, or even if I'm, I just study all the time, and it's not like I'm disciplined. I'm just curious and interested. So I say that the technology is getting that good these days that you might not need necessarily the greatest music theory anymore, but I do encourage everyone to get the fundamentals at least, and probably keyboard too. Get across the keyboard, because if you're a guitar player, you're a little bit limited in terms of your music production stuff, because obviously you're playing guitar, but you can't turn that into a saxophone. Well, you can, but then you're starting to do workarounds and stuff like that. So if you can play keyboard and you know your way around a keyboard, well, then you have access to a lot of stuff, you know. There's. I mean, I can talk about all the this kind of stuff for forever. There's so much little tricks and tips, you know.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things that I've found, because I'm not really I'm not musically trained, is that I took this idea from the 12-bar blues, which is closing the circle, so making some. In the 12-bar blues, you have this very strong pull to close circle and make some, and if you get it wrong, it just sounds wrong. It's got to land right. And so I took that idea and I apply it across all kind of music theory, is that I'm always trying to close circle. And so when I do my music writing, whether it's 2 bars or 4 bars, so obviously everything's in, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, whatever. And so I have this idea of circles, and so I create points of difference, and I'm telling a story before I close circle. So if it's a 4-bar pattern, I might be doing something a little bit different before I close circle on the 4th. And so then I have bigger circles that are part of choruses, and if you're repeating the verse twice, well then there's 8 circles, and then there's a larger 16 circle. And so when I close the larger 16 circle, I'm finishing the story. I'm either taking someone somewhere, or I could be letting them think that we're going somewhere, and then the payoff is actually later, and so that's part of a bigger circle. And so that's my own kind of version of music theory that I kind of created, and it works for me, and it's really good for getting out of the loop. And so so I just take that from the 12-bar blues, because it's got a really strong pull. It's making you close the circle, and so I took that and applied it across all kind of music styles.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, and I can sort of imagine, I got the visualization of the big circle, the little circles, and it all closes up telling a story.
Yeah.
And I guess it also helps you make sure that you are completing the sound, and as you said, the story is taking you on a journey. You're making sure that it has completed its journey, even the little ones, before the overall big story of the song wraps up.
Yeah, that's it.
So I guess it'd be great to talk a bit more about, well, we're on one end of the music side of production. I'm in the studio, and I sort of at the very end where I get to play any of the songs you might come up with, and you're in the, I guess, what would you say your position is? You'd roughly be somewhere in the middle before it all goes out to production or to like marketing and stuff like that.
So usually I'll take a commission. So I'm instructed to write a piece for a film or something like that. I mean, no one here would have known that they've heard my music, but I would suggest probably most people in this room have heard my music and not known it. It's just a lot of my stuff is just background stuff inside films and things like that. And sometimes they're theme music and things like that, or sometimes I can work with another composer to bring an indigenous element into the music storytelling. And so my part is production. I'll do mix and I'll do mastering, so getting it ready for broadcast, and then I give it to an editor, and the editor puts it in the film. So that's in terms of the film stuff. If I'm working with other artists, it all depends on what they're wanting from me. Are they wanting me to track? Are we sending it off to another mix house? Are we mixing it there? Are we mastering it there? It all depends on the scope of the project.
Yeah.
But after the actual work is done, I let it go, and then it goes off to publishing or whatever.
So would musicians typically come to you with a bit of an idea, and then you help them work on the sort of the other side of it? They've got that songwriting side, they've got an idea on how they want it to sound. You build the actual. It gets a bit tricky with the technical side, but that background production bit of it.
I'm laughing when you say this, actually, because it's an absolute must that people come to me kind of knowing their stuff. Like, I'm happy to work on some, feel-good productions and stuff like that, but if it gets to the point where I'm composing the music, then it's people should have their comps, and then I can help them take it to another place. But if it gets to the point where I'm comping it, it's probably not the right fit. It's a tricky one. Yeah. It's a tricky one because it's otherwise I'm the composer, and they're not. It's my song, it's not theirs. You know what I mean?
That's it. And I bring that up because I've had situations in studio where people have come in and they've come in not with an idea, and I've had to help them essentially create something around that, and not necessarily for songwriting, but even for just storytelling and things like that. So as a music creator, when you do come to people like Petris, I mean, it helps to have an idea in mind. I want it to sound like this. This is the overall idea of how I want the album to come out and these songs to come out.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes, you start off with a guide track, and then, everyone goes home, and then we can, look at who you want to work with and things like that. And I mean, guide tracks are amazing just because, like, you just got the idea down. All the musicians that you want to work with can do something with the guide track in terms of them comping or being inspired or whatever. And it's a tricky one because everything inspires everything. And so, like, if the bass player then puts down the bass line, and then change the inspiration for the guitarist or whatever. So, but it's a good place to start, and sometimes that's better than coming in and just doing it all. Yeah.
Interesting you say that too, because you're right. Like, something that inspires something might then inspire something else, and then turn that process to a long one. And I was curious how long a typical song takes. Let's use Mark for example. He comes in and how long does it take to work on one song on average? To get one song from here's the idea to, like, okay, it's done.
Yeah, I mean, how long is a piece of string?
Knew that was coming.
Because music and actually sound is also very personal. That's something I learned. Like, sound is very personal, and people can get very serious about sound. If an artist is given the time for them to express themselves and get it to where they want to get it, that's the ideal situation. And sometimes it might be budget doesn't afford that. It might be time constraints. It might be a schedule. You've got to be somewhere else in the world. It might be other people's availability. So, it's in the ideal world, and this is across all different types of arts, is that it's let go when the time is right, and sometimes it's never quite where you wanted it, but you got to let it go.
Yeah.
Otherwise also your efficiency goes down as either as a business or a contractor or a subcontractor. So if you're getting paid, say $2,000 for 10 days and it takes you 20 days, the value of your work has gone down. So I just threw that number out there. It's not that, but
no, but those are good points though as well when it comes to that songwriting process and not letting yourself get bogged down too much in taking too much time in exactly how you want it to sound. Let it have a chance to go on its own, and maybe later you want to remix it or change it, but know when to let things go on that. I guess it'd be interesting as well to hear if anyone else out there, when we get time at the end, has any questions, if you'd be willing to take any questions from the audience, Petris, towards the end.
Yeah, sure.
So
there's a little billboard there. There's some photos there, and you can kind of have a sense of what the studio is and stuff like that. Obviously, a part of what I do and how I got here was actually through music, but I end up going into a different part of the industry, and that's something that young fellas got to keep an eye out for, because the industry is big. Like, you can get into lighting, which it's actually part of sound, believe it or not. Like, I know it's not sound, but it's all part of the live show and stuff like that. Staging, stage managing, all that kind of stuff. Live sound, doing production sound in films, which is awesome. That's a lot of fun, and the industry is massive, and it's not just music production. It's like it actually needs a lot of people coming through, and it's a lot of fun. So kind of broaden your horizons and get out of that idea that it's just all about music. And you can do music, of course, but yeah, like, I mean, I do fight scenes and all that kind of stuff, and sometimes I'm dropping a bag of potatoes into the studio, or I could be making sounds for rockets or gunshots and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes I'll get my son and he'll rip open an orange, and that's like for a stabbing scene, which I probably shouldn't get him to do. But you get to have fun with sound, and sound effects is awesome. I like sound effects, especially when exciting. Like doing car chase or something like that. Yeah. So one thing I say to young fellas is that when you if you want to work in a studio, is when you go to the studio, come there with something, because everyone comes to the studio and says, oh, I just had a guy recently, actually, he was like 30 years old, and he goes, can I get a job in your studio? I said, oh yeah, what have you done? He goes, oh, nothing, I just really like studios. And I was like, okay. I said, have you got any experience? No. And it's like, well, get at the back of the line, like, and I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that, but, it is a little bit competitive, and you just but you're also coming with something. Otherwise, I could be paying to train him. I'm paying to give him everything that he wanted. You know what I mean? And then he's not going to be efficient. He's not going to be efficient for me for years. And so what I say to young fellas is, don't do it the way I did it. Go to AES, go to uni, do those things. Also study online and stuff like that. But you going to a studio and saying, oh, this is what I've done, I've got the fundamentals, and it's like, then someone will be like, okay, well then I'll show you the secrets. You know what I mean? As opposed to, just coming there and just hoping.
It sounds like they wanted to take a big shortcut to getting to that end part, working in a studio before the bits leading up to it.
Well, I did it a little bit different.
Can you break down into how you got started?
Yeah, I tried to get a job at a studio doing exactly that. And they said no, so I just built my own studio. I've had 3 now, so I've had 2 facilities that I just kind of outfitted, and then I had the 3rd one, which was purpose built, and that's like concrete Besser block and everything. Like it's just an absolute cyclone bunker. It's even got a concrete roof in one of the rooms, so it's a 5-room facility now. We'll probably get those 5 rooms running very soon, but at the moment I've got 3 rooms that are functional, and then there'll be 5 rooms in a year or so.
Yeah.
And so.
So going back to, because that sounded really interesting, back to your origins, right? Back to, how long has it been since Wild Willie's been running, and how long before that have you been trying to get into this type of work?
I put the pegs down for the studio about, I don't know, 25 years ago. I was like 20, what am I, 40 now? So 20 years ago. 20 years ago I was at Polara, and I still got microphones that I bought when I was at Polara that still make money for me today. So I was pretty keen. I had, at one stage I had like $300,000 in speakers. I still got a lot of speakers now, but I was just crazy about sound, and I was like, I actually should have been a musician, but I end up mucking around with the technology, and I liked that, and I had a lot of fun with that, and eventually where I kind of found my niche and what I was actually good at was actually storytelling with sound, and so I ended up, yeah. I'm not sure if I went off track there a little bit. You might have to help me out there.
That sounded pretty spot on. So you sort of stepped into it wanting, knowing you really like sound, you had those opportunities, but ended up finding this way eventually into making Wild Willie sounds, going more into that background production stuff, eh? Yeah, and
I tried a couple of different things, and and just to see how the market responded to different products, and I mean it was pretty expensive. I was in live sound for a little bit there, and that was a lot of fun, and but it got to the point where it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're lifting things, you're employing people, and it's just a lot, and so I reconciled it down to just being able to work by myself. And I mean, I kind of went about things a little bit wrong as well. Don't do it like me. But what I did was I kind of built the studio first, the infrastructure. So it's like we're talking about $500,000 worth of building, probably more.
Is this before you had any real solid work in sound production or anything lined up?
Well, I had the two smaller studios and I had very basic gear, but so one of the things is that you sometimes you're better off either renting a space and outfitting that or going into your bedroom and doing it up, and that way you're not spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars before you even get a microphone. You know what I mean? So you can actually get all the things that you need for your production, and then when the time is right, go and build your facility, and then go get your thing. Because I've only just recently been able to buy all the fun things, and like at the moment, I think we've got like around 80 grand worth of mics or something, Uncle? Yeah. And about 300 grand of software. We've got all like Neve preamps and stuff like that, so like a lot of channels too. So we're basically international broadcast standard. We can do what the big studios can do in terms of signal chain, maybe not in terms of everything they can do, but in terms of equipment, we're definitely not prosumer. It's we've gone the other way.
Yeah, and that's really deadly. I wanted to bring it back to, I would say at this point you built a pretty successful production studio there, Wild Willie Sounds. What can you tell us about the challenges to get to that point? Obviously, you've described a few, and it's not easy, but the challenges of getting to the point where you're at now in a regional town like Broome. Having to compete with cities and international opportunities and stuff like that.
It doesn't make any good business sense at all. I should have went into like safety or something like that. Like the return on investment wasn't quite there, and I probably could have if I had a bit more help or advice along the way. Like I know things now, but I was kind of a little bit stubborn. This is what I'm going to do, and that's it. That's the end of the story. And it kind of felt like I was being pulled along as opposed to me pushing this along. To drill down to your question, I had a couple of ways that I approached it. So it's like an upside down triangle. You put a little bit down the bottom, and then you get interest on it. And what do you call it? Accumulative interest. So it's like that with equipment. So if I had $2,000, I wouldn't buy 10 things with that. I would just buy one microphone that was worth $2,000. So everything I bought was high end, and that way I never ever had to reconcile my assets into bigger assets. And so I also kind of whenever I had work, it was always something like I would probably 50% of my money was like on bills, and 30% was on fun, and then 20% was always on doing something, and sometimes it could be as simple as hanging a door or doing some tiling or that kind of stuff. And so it's just that squirreling away over time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What's your most expensive microphone?
Oh, you're getting me excited now. You're getting me excited. I got this Flea, U47, and it's a vintage U47 mic. So two-pack, Biggie. What's her name? Mariah Carey. Who else? All the big names, all your favourite singers. They've all sung through this mic, and I've got a just what's your mic there? Is it your mic?
Oh, something's going through.
Yeah, now soundy. But it's like EA Sports. It's that kind of mic. It's and it's really exciting because it brings all this stuff up that, and you just can't put your finger on it. You just can't put your finger on it. It's really exciting. I play around with it all the time. Like I do all like little voice acting stuff, and it's just so good because I set it up for other people, and then I have a little go, put my headphones on.
Something about the way it just makes you sound.
It's unreal. See, you're getting me all excited. See,
I know you like your mics and your toys.
Let me talk about my mics then. So I've got like DPA 4011s and Earthworks, Shope mics and all this kind of stuff, and they're all for a different thing. And like you go, okay, well, why do you need all these different mics? There's different tools for different tricks. and also you need a certain amount of mics as well so that you can actually get the coverage. Like a drum kit, it's not unreasonable to mic a drum with 10 microphones. So then straight away you're losing 10 mics and 10 channels. So, yeah.
And then besides just plugging in, hooking a mic up to something, there's also everything else around it, like mixing levels and then making sure it all balances and adds in well together. That's all the other stuff that people don't see when they're talking into a mic.
Yeah. I kind of, because I did research a lot, I did study a lot, and it was all just personal study, and there's white papers out there and all that kind of stuff. Like, you can go really deep on this stuff. There's a lot of education out there. And I happened across a few things because I never had really any experience in anyone else's studio. I obviously happened across a lot of the same stuff that is industry standards and stuff like that. But in film, like, no one's using hardware, and that's a real music thing. And so I kind of stumbled across this little secret is that I can sound better than other people, and they don't know, And so this is just in terms of dialogue and stuff. And so I'm going through like full tech EQs and stuff like that for dialogue, which is like, no one does that, and because it's just the technology is moving so fast. I remember someone saying to me a while ago, and they said, I said, does people go through hardware in the industry? And they said, no, and neither do any of your, none of your competitors do it, so why should you? And I was just like, well, I just follow my ears. And so that's kind of how I've, learnt my procedure policies and all that kind of stuff, is just through following my ears. And we've had people in the studio that have a lot of technical savvy, but they don't have the ears, and it took me years to get my ears, Hey, Uncle? And it's just like, but can you hear it? And they're going, yeah, but technically, yes, this and the phase and all that. So, but can you hear it? And it's like, that's, follow your ears, but also follow everything else, all your other instincts and stuff like that.
Yeah, really interesting you mentioned that. I got a similar thing in my studio. There's just something that you can just hear. Your ears have developed over years of getting used to the sounds and what you expect, that you just pick things up. You can't explain it, but just, as you said, follow your ears. And if you're a musician, your ears and then your heart and whatever else you use for your songwriting process.
Yeah, definitely.
So just before we wrap out of time, I want to make sure we let especially some of our more emerging musicians, artists know, if you were to, break it down to a basic sort of home production kit, like if someone were to start trying to do the kind of stuff you do at home, where would they start? What would be the most basic way to get started?
Basic way to get started is like, don't go and buy microphones that you think are awesome. You got to kind of buy the microphone that kind of, so for example, if you get a KM 185, for example, you'll be able to put that in your bedroom, because a lot of these large diaphragm mics and stuff like that will just pick up everything. And so when you make your investments, like, you might think, oh, look, this is the bee's knees, and this is what this artist used and all this kind of stuff, but then it's going to kill your production, because it's not suited for your space. So, I think the best way for you to, is probably to speak to people that have got a little bit of a sense of things. So, there's people that you can call. You might have a music teacher, and they can get you onto someone. Is to actually ask for advice. Now, the cool thing about where we are today is that everyone's making stuff, and a lot of it's really high quality. Obviously, you got your budget to consider. And you've also got your style of music to consider. So if you're like really rock and roll, then you might lean towards Pro Tools. But if you're like into, pop or rap or something like that, you might go to like Reaper. And Reaper's free too, by the way. Check out Reaper, and it's actually really, really good. And that's what a lot of people recommend, is Reaper. Pro Tools is just too expensive. Pro Tools is good if you're a professional musician, because you can track your stuff at home. and then you can come into the studio and I can just bring your session back up and I can see everything you've done, and so I can understand your vision and I can just take it from there. But yeah, it's just, I guess one of the biggest things is getting technology out of your way, is get the technology out of your way. A lot of people are like, I can't make my music until I have this piece. I can't do this until I get that. And it's like, no, a lot of the time technology gets in the way. It's like, sometimes it's just press record, even if it sounds like crap, is get the idea down, and then you can actually take the time to retrack that in the pristine kind of thing. But there's nothing worse than gadgets getting in the way, and you know, even, you know, I know great musicians that are just amazing, and it's like, if they just made music and just played and recorded it, it'll be great, but they're just like, I need this little technology and I need that and I need this sampler and all this. It's just like the world is missing out and you're missing out because technology is getting in the way.
Yeah,
so.
Really well put. I mean, that's why we got people like you in these roles, so that the talented musicians out there can write their songs, you know, do their craft, and then come to you for the production and the tech side, you know, and people like you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Definitely.
we're getting close to running out of time. Is there anything else you wanted to, you know, final word you wanted to put out there to our audience, and maybe see if anyone's got any questions for Petris as well?
Yeah, I had this young fellow call me up a couple of years ago, and because he wanted to get into music production, and so I kind of gave him some advice and all this kind of stuff, and he called me back a couple of years later, and he was really upset because he hadn't produced a song that was a hit yet, and you know, like he didn't make it big and all this kind of stuff. It's like, dude, it's like, you know, it's been 2 years, and it's like, you know, there's senior musicians, master musicians out there that are still waiting for their shot too, you know, and it's just like, it's you know, obviously have hope and all this kind of stuff, but, you know, don't lose hope when it doesn't happen, you know. It's just, you know, just keep going, and sometimes it's just about being a part of it and being in the space and contributing to Australian film or Australian music or the arts or whatever. It could be as simple as recording, you know, Aboriginal songs. A big passion of mine is to get Junba and Ilma down and archive that for the safety of the future and for the people, and give it to the people too, and so they can have it too, you know, and it's just keep those things. So some things are bigger than either the recognition or the money or you know, whatever the fanciful stuff is, you know, there's a lot more there.
Yeah. Follow your opportunities, and I mean, as you said, there's other ways you can give back as well, like, as you said, recording, archiving deadly stories, doing the kind of work you do there. Does anyone have any questions for Petris, you know, whether it's about music production or, you know, anything to do with songmaking? Feel free to chuck any questions out, or otherwise, if you don't have any questions, we can keep having a yarn. Maybe ask him if he's got any more mic questions or headphones. There we go, Mark. What's up, Mark?
For somebody, and thanks guys, it's been awesome listening to the both of you. For somebody who's a home recording musician, they don't have a treated space, it's not acoustically designed, bare bones, Petris, first mic you'd recommend for them?
Neumann KM185.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's a hypercardioid mic, and for whatever reason, it's just got really good rejection. It's really high quality. It can do a lot of things. It can guitars sound great on it and all that kind of stuff. If you only had one mic, that's it. If that was the only mic. $900, or you probably get it like $750. You probably get it $750 these days, but it's something you keep for the rest of your life, you know. And you can use it live as well, which is great. It's just very versatile, but the biggest virtue of it is the fact that you don't need a professional space for it.
Yeah, back on that professional space. So you've got your laptop, you've got your guitar and your mic now. What about like padding? What about the space itself? You know, do they need to worry too much about that?
Well, I mean, yes and no. Look, for the sake of being creative and just getting in there and having fun, I mean, you can always rent out a professional space for for the things you need acoustical recordings. So just get out there, start making your music and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, padding and things like that, there's stuff online, but it is a science, and if you're really serious, you should be looking at bringing in professionals to acoustically, well, what they do is, I actually work with a guy in Canada, and so this guy, he gets me to do all the measurements and everything like that, and then he tells me build this wall, and some of my walls are like this thing, and each wall will have a different density fiberglass. So you can see some of them there. There's a bass trap there. There's a cloud on the top, and the idea is that you're tuning your room and obviously dealing with your earlier reflections, and then those speakers there. Those speakers also tune. So there's two layers of. So you're trying to create a neutral thing, because one of the challenges is, well, obviously the recording of the audio, but the other part of it is your room and your speakers are lying to you. They're not telling you the truth. And so let's just say that your room has got too much treatment on there, and then all of a sudden all the high frequencies are being soaked up. And so what will happen is you then naturally turn the hi-hats up. So it's, they go really high, but you can't hear it. It just sounds normal to you. And then you go into a bathroom or something, and someone's playing your music back in a bathroom or something that is really reflective with high. Then it's an extra exaggerated hi-hat. And so what we try to do is try to even out the room and even out the speakers, and so that when the speakers play to us, when we're making our decisions, it's not lying to us. And so yes, it is important, but it's not more important than being creative and having fun and expressing yourself. Again, technology has to get out of the way.
Yeah. Really good point. I mean, if you just start off getting your song out there, record it in the first place, you're not trying to, release it straight away to the world. Get it down, hear it, listen back to it, and make your changes then. Yeah. Yeah,
you can jump in the car and listen to what you just produced, and it's called reference checking and stuff like that. You can go in the lounge room, put it on your sound bar and things like that, and get a sense of how it's translating into real world. But yeah, I mean, it's quite normal to have like a 15 dB boost in the bottom frequencies. So that's what bass traps are for. That's those triangle ones in the corner. So you could have 15 dB at 120 hertz, and so you think that it's nice and bassy, and so you turn the bass down, and then it goes somewhere else, and it's just lacking that drive.
Yeah, there's a real science to it. As you said, don't let technology get in the way of your creative process. Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other final questions for Petris? Yeah, we've got someone in the back there. Hello.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm here from 3 years in Broome. I'm technically still a backpacker, but I'm coming from Europe, and I was working for Disney as a cartoonist. So I came here because I see a lot of talents and potential in the people, but I see that actually at this time in Broome, there is kind of lack of people all together to create together as creative people. How you see Broome in the future, in the really close future in this way? Because Aboriginal culture is incredible. I think need more light. In my case, I teach animation and multimedia to Aboriginal people with disabilities and not. So I feel like it's a place that is ready to explode in a creative way, but we don't have yet the capacities in general, not only musically. How you see Broome in 2-3 years? I feel deeply that this place has a lot of fire of creativity, a lot of sparkles, and we need places where we can put the lights on these incredible talents that we have. How you see the future here?
Well, I'm kind of, the glasses are half full already. Like, I mean, the amount of talent, and Broome is punching above its weight. Like, I mean, you got Mark Colesmith right there. Like, go type his name into IMDb, you'll be blown away. Like, he's on like Call of Duty and everything. Like, and he's pretty much in a lot of big Australian films. We've got the Pigram brothers. We've got Wayne Barker. We've got like so many talent here right now. I'm pretty excited for Broome. We've got 12 hours of sunlight. Like, you can shoot films all day, and when a film costs $300,000 a day, if you can save 4 hours a day, that's a lot of money. you know, if you can work an extra 4 hours a day, it's a lot of money. So we've got a lot going for us. I mean, obviously, Broome has a very Broome look, and so does a Kimberley, so it's not like we could shoot, you know, Matrix here or something, but a lot of Aussie films and Indigenous films definitely can be shot here, and yeah, I think in terms of bringing it, like having I think at one stage we did have a music representative in Broome. I'm not sure because I wasn't quite part of that, but there was a collective there. A lot of our fraternities and stuff like that are actually kind of auspiced in Perth. So we do have institutions there that do kind of, you know, but it's a matter of lobbying for those things to, you know, that recognition. We had Cinefest Oz come to Broome last year. So that's, you know, those are the kind of things that are kind of part of it. I went to Industry Day and I set up this poster here and that little thing there, you know, made a big effort to get that printed and everything. And no one turned up to Industry Day. I was like, what? And then I said, okay, well, I'm going to go back to work then. So I went back to work and I was working on this film. And then the next day was the red carpet, and that's when all the who's who of the zoo went to that. And I was like, I missed out on all the drinks too. So I go, you know, it's I think the glass is half full, and that we can already start celebrating because Broome is just, you know, just doing so well. Like it's so good, so good.
Yeah, I think between events like this, Galari Media, of course, our arts person is here who basically, that is a big part of her role as well, is working alongside artists and musicians, giving them opportunities to perform and have the music out there. So between community stations, events like this, our local music producers, we've got a long way to go, but I agree with Petris, glass half full. There's a massive amount of talent here, but there's more that can be done with it. And I would like to see some kind of hub where it's easy for people to come together, to work on their skills, to jam even. I don't know, there's so many opportunities. Thank you, everyone. Is there any final question? I think we're pretty good. Well, thank you very much, Petris, Torres, our guest, Wild Willy Solutions. Round of applause. You've been deadly. It's been awesome chatting with you, Petris.
Thank you.